When Mark moved into the rundown apartment complex, he was excited. It was affordable and close to his new job. The building had an eerie charm, with its cracked walls and flickering lights. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, but there was one thing they never talked about: the tenant in the basement. Curiosity gnawed at Mark. He often heard faint sounds, soft cries, and the shuffling of feet coming from the basement late at night. When he mentioned it to his neighbors, they quickly changed the subject, exchanging uneasy glances. "Just don't go down there," one of them said. "It's better left alone." One rainy evening, feeling bold, Mark decided to investigate. He slipped out of his apartment and crept down the dimly lit stairwell to the basement door. It was slightly ajar, the faint light inside flickering. He pushed it open and stepped into the darkness. The basement was a maze of old furniture and boxes, the air thick with dust and decay. As he moved deeper in, he felt a chill that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. That's when he heard a soft, whimpering sound coming from the far corner. Mark's heart raced. "Hello," he called, but the whimpering stopped abruptly. He hesitated but felt compelled to go closer. In the corner, he saw a figure huddled beneath a pile of old blankets. "Are you okay?" he asked, approaching slowly. The figure turned, revealing a gaunt woman with hollow eyes. "Help me," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't get out." Mark felt a mix of fear and sympathy. "What happened? How long have you been here?" "I've been forgotten," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "I moved in years ago. I thought it would be a fresh start, but it all went wrong. They keep me here." He glanced around, feeling the weight of her words. "Who keeps you here?" But before she could answer, a loud crash echoed through the basement, and Mark jumped back. The woman's expression changed from despair to terror. "You need to leave, they're coming." Panic surged through him. He turned to flee, but as he reached the door, it slammed shut on its own. The air grew heavy, and he felt a presence behind him. "You shouldn't have come here," a deep voice rumbled from the shadows. Mark's pulse quickened as he struggled to open the door. "Let me out," he shouted, but the handle wouldn't budge. He glanced back at the woman, who was now shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. They don't let anyone leave." With a surge of adrenaline, Mark threw his shoulder against the door, finally forcing it open. He stumbled into the hallway, heart racing, and ran up the stairs, the sounds of shuffling footsteps echoing behind him. When he reached his apartment, he locked the door and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The woman's face haunted him, her plea for help and the terror in her eyes. That night, he tried to sleep, but every creak and whisper in the building kept him awake. Days turned into weeks, and he couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The whispers intensified, and shadows danced in his peripheral vision. He learned that others had lived in the building but had left abruptly, some claiming to hear the cries of the woman in the basement. Determined to help her, Mark returned to the basement one last time. Armed with a flashlight, he descended the stairs, heart pounding. This time, he was resolved to free her. As he entered the basement, the air was thick with tension. He called out, "I'm back. I want to help you." Silence hung heavy in the air. Then, from the darkness, the woman emerged. "You shouldn't have come back," she warned, her voice trembling. "They're angry." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and shadows twisted around them. "You're not meant to interfere," the deep voice boomed again, vibrating through the walls. The shadows shifted, coiling around Mark's feet like living tendrils. Mark's heart raced as he backed away. "I just want to help her," he shouted, trying to break through the suffocating darkness. "Leave now," the voice commanded, "or you will join her." In that moment, Mark realized the truth. The woman was trapped, and so was he. The shadows were feeding off their fear, ensnaring them both in a cycle of despair. With one last surge of determination, Mark turned to the woman. "We can escape together. You don't have to stay here." Tears filled her eyes, but the shadows tightened their grip. "It's too late for me," she whispered, "but you can still get out." As the shadows closed in, Mark grasped her hand, determined to pull her with him. But in that instant, he felt her slip away, drawn back into the darkness. "No," he cried, but it was too late. The door to the basement swung shut, leaving Mark alone in the suffocating darkness. The whispers returned, a cacophony of voices drowning out his screams. Days later, The landlord noticed the door to Mark's apartment had been left unlocked. When he entered, he found it empty, the lights flickering ominously. The neighbors whispered about the new tenant who had vanished, joining the growing list of those lost to the shadows beneath the building. And in the basement, the woman continued to wait, her whispers echoing through the walls, longing for someone to remember her story. For over a decade, the old apartment complex on Maple Street had a reputation. Tenants came and went, but many spoke of strange occurrences, disembodied whispers, cold spots, and the feeling of being watched. Some even claimed they heard the faint sounds of children laughing, echoing through the hallways, despite no children living in the building. When Lisa moved in, she brushed off the stories as mere superstition. She was a graduate student, eager for a quiet space to study. The rent was cheap, and the location perfect. The apartment was small, with peeling wallpaper and creaky floors, but she felt it had character. At first, life in the apartment was peaceful, but soon, Lisa began to notice odd things. It started with the lights flickering occasionally, then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, like the echoes of a conversation in another room. But as weeks went by, the whispers grew more distinct, calling her name softly in the dead of night. One evening, while studying late, Lisa heard a child's laughter coming from the hallway. Intrigued, she set her books aside and opened her door, peering out. The hallway was empty, the only sound the creaking of the old building. She brushed it off as her imagination and returned to her studies. As the days turned into weeks, the disturbances escalated. Objects would shift positions when she wasn't looking, and cold drafts swept through her apartment, chilling her to the bone. The whispers became clearer, weaving into her dreams, filled with images of children playing. Each night, she found herself waking up to a soft voice saying, "Help us." Feeling overwhelmed, Lisa decided to investigate the building's history. She visited the local library, combing through old newspapers and city records. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. Years ago, a tragic fire had engulfed the apartment complex. Several children had perished, their laughter now replaced by silence. Determined to understand the spirits haunting her home, Lisa delved deeper. She learned that many residents had experienced similar encounters but rarely spoke of them openly. The complex had a dark past, shrouded in sorrow and loss. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt an icy presence settle beside her. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a gust of wind. "Help us!" The voice was urgent, filled with desperation. Driven by compassion and fear, Lisa gathered candles and a small altar, determined to communicate with the spirits. She sat up in her living room, lit the candles, and called out to them. "I want to help you, please show yourselves." The temperature dropped, and the room filled with an otherworldly glow. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that resembled children. They reached out to her, their eyes wide with pleading. "We're lost," one of them cried. "We need to be found." Lisa's heart ached at their sorrow. "How can I help you?" she asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Remember us," they whispered in unison. "Help us find peace." Determined to honor their memory, Lisa organized a small memorial for the children who had perished in the fire. She invited her neighbors, sharing the history of the building and encouraging them to remember the lives lost. As the candles flickered and stories were shared, she felt the heaviness in the air lift slightly, replaced by a sense of warmth. But the relief was short-lived. That night, the whispers returned, more frantic than before. "Help us, don't forget." Lisa woke to find her apartment filled with a thick mist, the temperature plummeting. Shadows swirled around her, and the children's faces emerged from the darkness, more vivid than ever. "You have to help us," one of them screamed, reaching out. Terrified yet resolute, Lisa returned to the library, searching for more information. She discovered a forgotten memorial site just outside the city where the fire had originally occurred. It had been abandoned, neglected, and overgrown. The next day, she gathered supplies and set out to the memorial site. When she arrived, she was struck by the eerie silence. It felt as if the world had paused. Lisa cleaned the area, placing flowers and candles, calling out the names of the children she had learned about. As dusk fell, she lit the candles and spoke to them. "You are remembered. You are not forgotten." In that moment, she felt a shift in the air. The shadows surrounding her began to retreat, and the whispers transformed into soft sighs of relief. "Thank you," they echoed, fading into the night. Lisa returned to her apartment feeling a profound sense of peace. The disturbances ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Though the memories of the children lingered, they no longer filled the space with sorrow. Over the years, Lisa continued to honor their memory, organizing yearly memorials for the lost children of the complex. The apartment building remained a testament to the past, but now it held a sense of tranquility, a place where echoes of laughter could finally be heard, no longer haunting but celebrating the lives once lost. In a nondescript apartment complex on the edge of town, there was an apartment that had remained vacant for years. Apartment to see. The landlord, a frail elderly woman named Mrs. Wilkins, had grown weary of showing it to potential tenants. Every time someone expressed interest, they seemed to change their minds abruptly, citing strange feelings or odd occurrences. Despite the whispers surrounding apartment to see, Mark was drawn to it. He had just moved to the area for work and was looking for a place that fit his budget. When he met Mrs. Wilkins, she hesitated but eventually agreed to show him the apartment. As soon as he stepped inside, a chill ran down his spine. The air was heavy, almost oppressive. The apartment was filled with old furniture covered in dust, as if the previous tenant had simply walked away and never returned. Mark brushed off the discomfort, thinking it was just an old place in need of some love. A few weeks into his new life there, he began to notice peculiar things. At night, he often heard soft whispers echoing through the walls, like conversations taking place just out of reach. The whispers were unsettling but not overtly threatening, and he convinced himself it was just the old building settling. One evening, after a long day at work, Mark was relaxing on the couch when he felt an inexplicable urge to explore the attic. The apartment's layout included a staircase leading to a small door at the end of the hallway. He had never seen anyone use it, but curiosity gnawed at him. When he opened the door, a musty smell enveloped him. The attic was dark, lit only by a small window that filtered in a sliver of moonlight. Old boxes and furniture were stacked haphazardly, and as he stepped inside, he noticed something odd. A large trunk in the corner, its lid slightly ajar. Compelled, Mark approached it. He opened the trunk and found a collection of old photographs, faded and yellowed with age. They depicted a woman who looked eerily familiar. She was smiling in some, but her eyes held a sadness that sent a chill through him. As he sifted through the photos, he stumbled upon a newspaper clipping about a woman named Clara who had lived in apartment to see decades ago. The article described her as a vibrant artist who mysteriously disappeared one night, leaving behind a chaotic life and an unfinished painting. Mark's heart raced. Was this the woman from the photographs? He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The next night, as he lay in bed, he was jolted awake by the sound of soft crying. The sound seemed to seep through the walls, echoing around him. "Please," a voice whispered. "Help me." Terrified, Mark got up to investigate, his heart pounding. He followed the sound to the attic. As he reached the door, he felt a cold breeze rush past him, sending shivers down his spine. The whispers intensified, and he could almost make out words. "Find my painting. Help me." Determined to uncover the truth, Mark scoured the attic for clues. He rummaged through the boxes, eventually finding a small, dust-covered canvas leaning against the wall. The painting was unfinished but striking, an abstract representation of a woman standing by a window, her expression filled with longing. Suddenly, the temperature in the attic dropped drastically. Shadows flickered around him, and he felt a presence, like someone was standing right behind him. Mark spun around, but no one was there. "Finish it." The voice urged, now clearer and more insistent. "Please." In a trance, Mark returned to his apartment with the canvas. Over the next few nights, he poured himself into the painting, feeling a strange connection to Clara. He painted the details he had felt while looking at the photograph, the sadness in her eyes, the longing in her expression. As he added the final touches, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders, as if the air had cleared. That night, he dreamt of Clara. In his dream, she smiled at him, a sense of gratitude washing over her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing like a soft breeze. When he woke up, The heaviness in the apartment had vanished. It felt light, almost welcoming. The following days passed without incident, and Mark finally felt at home. One evening, he found Mrs. Wilkins in the hallway, and she looked at him with a strange glimmer in her eye. "You finished it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Finished what?" Mark replied, confused. "The painting." "Clara's painting," she said softly. "You're the first tenant to ever help her. She's finally at peace." Mark realized then that the apartment had a history of loss and longing that he had unwittingly helped to mend. Apartment to see was no longer a place of fear but a testament to the connection between past and present, where Clara's spirit could finally rest. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.